We did get a few questions along the way, and it's always nice when people have something which is on their minds or on their hearts, and we can spend a bit of time investigating that. I've already tried to kind of give an answer on the fly last time, but now I want to back it up with a couple of suttas. So the question basically was, how do we know that we are on the path? How do we know what the path is? And how do we know, how do we get some kind of feedback in some way to know that that is actually the right path? So there is two suttas that I was thinking of, and then I couldn't quite just bring up in my mind and recite right then and there. But they are the Buddha's advice, summarizing the teachings for Upāli. And you might remember Upāli was one of the Shakyans that ordained soon after the Buddha came back. And he was the barber. So they asked him to ordain first. And they asked him to ordain first so that they would have to pay respects to him, pay deference to him, and let him go for the meal first, and all these kind of things, to work on their egos, to lessen their sense of self. So that was actually very wise things to do. But anyway, this is Upāli coming up to the Buddha and asking before going on retreat how to practice. And then the second one, which explains, the same teaching, the same summary, but with different words, was given to Mahāpajāpati, to the Buddha's, what do you call her? It wasn't his mum, stepmom you call it. Okay. Or she was basically she was the aunt, isn't it, of her mom, and she was looking after her because her mom passed away, they say, within seven days after she gave birth at Lumbini. I don't actually know if we've spoken about this, but maybe Ajahn Nisarno has mentioned that. Okay, anyway, so let's have a look at those suttas. Okay, now that's rolling forth the wheel of the Dhamma. We had that before. Is this the right one? The teacher's instructions. Yes. So first, Venerable Upāli, and that is from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Sevens, 83. And it goes as follows. Then Venerable Upāli went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, "Sir, may the Buddha please teach me Dhamma in brief. When I've heard it, I'll live alone, withdrawn, diligent, keen, and resolute." So he's basically getting ready to go into seclusion, getting ready to have a retreat. And he wants to get some inspiration, get some guidance, how to practice in solitude. Upāli, you might know that certain things don't lead solely to disillusionment, dispassion, cessation, peace, insight, awakening, and extinguishment. And the words that are used in Pali, probably a lot of them are familiar to you. So the first one is nibbida, and that's translated as disillusionment. Nibbida is basically a moving away, a turning away. Instead of inclining towards the five senses, inclining towards the world, you decline. You go in the opposite direction. You renounce. You say no. But nibbida is something which happens naturally. So in the scriptures it's described as a feather which comes too close to the fire, and it just starts to melt and kind of curl away from the flames, curl away from the heat. And it's a natural process. Sometimes some people kind of feel it's a very negative thing, and the Buddha is just so pessimistic, talking about suffering and talking about that you can't really get anything out of the world. But once wisdom has developed to a certain stage, then you will understand that some things are just not worth it, and you will have a feeling of nibbida, a feeling of ugh, I just don't really want to engage with this thing. But it's not a kind of like an ill will as such. It's just the understanding it's not worth it. It hurts. It's unnecessary. It's pointless, as it was described in another sutta, in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And that's what will lead to viraga. So raga, we might be familiar with. That's kind of like lust or longing or wanting something really strongly. And V, if V is put in front of the word, it means the opposite. So it is dispassion. But it also means fading away. So as you turn away from things, quite naturally, you don't engage with the things which are creating defilements, making them stronger, then they lose their fuel. They lose the energy which keeps the momentum going. And then that will lead to fading away. But fading away is a beautiful word. It gives you an idea of time as well. Fading away is a process, and fading away needs patience. So it's not just this kind of like poof and gone. It's a gradual thing. And so the more mindfulness we have, the more understanding we have of what the path is, the more we will recognize those kind of signposts, those what are they called? The thing, like when you walk to a certain place, you know the landmarks. That's the word, landmarks that you're going to go past. And as the practice develops, as you become more knowledgeable, but in a feeling sense, then you will recognize these kind of landmarks that you're passing along the way. And then from dispassion, from viraga, we go into nirodha. And nirodha is the word for cessation. Cessation means that something does disappear. Cessation means that something is gone. And the next word which comes up is upasamaya, upasama. And upasama means peace. But now the important understanding is to know where that peace is in that sequence. When does peace arise? Peace arises after disillusionment, dispassion and fading away, and cessation. Cessation could also be described as letting go, letting be, and then disappearance. Okay, thank you very much. They keep us well fed here. All right. Okay. It just keeps coming. I'm talking about letting go, and there's more stuff coming. But anyway, as I was saying, when you let go, what comes in, what arises in the space that was taken up by that thing that you got disillusioned from, is peace. But sometimes people don't get that, because in the world you think you have a desire, you have a longing, or you have aversion, and once you act on it and you kind of get rid, or you exterminate what you don't like, and you get what you like, then you will have peace. But you don't actually have peace. I don't know what you could call that, but you get some, some relief, but it's not actually peace which comes from this process that I was just describing. And then from that peace, we go into insight, abhinyaya. Nyaya is knowledge, but it's like the knowledge and the vision we talk about in Buddhism. It's not the book knowledge. It's insight that arises. And from that arises sambodhaya, sambodhi. Bodhi is awakening. And then nibbana, and that is extinguishment. So what's the difference between cessation and extinguishment? Cessation is something disappearing, but temporarily. So the potential is still there. But when something is extinguished, then it is uprooted. Then it is gone. And the word nibbana actually means something going out. A fire being extinguished. Or a candle just going out, being blown out, and disappearing completely. There is some people that came up to the Buddha and tried to find out, what happens when these things disappear. And that's this kind of big conundrum, this big question about a Buddha who has entered Nibbana, who has been fully extinguished. And they keep asking, is he still somewhere? Where has he gone? And the simile which is used is the simile of the fire. So first we talk about the fire, which is fueled by different things, by grass or by sticks or whatever it is. But then once that fire goes out, Vajragota is the person who is being taught in that sutta, is asked by the Buddha, where does the fire go? Does it go left, right, up or down, back or front? And he has to answer, no, it doesn't go anywhere. It just blows out. So it's not like Ajahn Brahm often says, there isn't a heaven or a hell for flames. If they've been good flames, they go to heaven. If they've been bad flames, they go down to hell. No, they just disappear. The causes and conditions that created them are extinguished, and so is the process of the heat, the fuel, and the oxygen which is needed for a fire. If they are not there, then the fire disappears completely. Okay, so that is the teachings to Upāli. And the Buddha says, categorically, you should remember these things as the teaching, the training, and the teacher's instructions. Okay, so that's one way of explaining it. And the other way is when we go to the sutta that was spoken to Gotamī. And that maybe gives you a little bit more kind of meat on the bone in terms of feeling and what's going on. So at one time, the Buddha was staying near Vaisali at the great wood in the hall with a peaked roof. Then Mahāpajāpati Gotamī went up to the Buddha, bowed, stood to one side, and said to him, Sir, may the Buddha please teach me Dhamma in brief. When I've heard it, I live alone, withdrawn, diligent, keen, and resolute. So again, someone who is willing to practice, is willing to let go of a lot of the distractions that we have in life, and then to bring the teachings into that conducive environment. Gotamī, you may know that certain things lead to passion, not dispassion, to yoking, not to unyoking, to accumulation, not dispersal, to more desire, not fewer, to lack of contentment, not contentment, to crowding, not seclusion, to laziness, not to energy, to being burdensome, not being unburdensome. Categorically, you should remember these things as not the teaching, not the training, and not the teacher's instructions. And then the Buddha repeats the whole thing in a positive manner, and as we go through it, we can maybe have a little look at these kind of things at the same time. So you might know that certain things lead to dispassion, not passion. And this is actually the same word. It's viraga here. But it goes in a little bit more detail here now. So it goes into unyoking, not yoking. So yojana, and that is basically the word in Pali which is used for the yoke that is bound up with the buffalo. So the cart and the buffalo, they are yoked together, they are fused together, they are kind of almost inseparable. So if we have things fade away, if we have an understanding of what this passion is and turning away, then we start to get disconnected from those things that you are pulling behind you or that are pulling you in all sorts of directions and trouble in the world. Then fewer desires, not more desires. So it's icha and apicha. So the people who come to Bodhinyana Monastery will probably know the second monk after Ajahn Brahm. He's called apichato. And that's exactly this word. It's the word of having few desires, of having few wishes. So when you simplify your life, when you have less desires and less wishes, then you are heading in the right direction again. And what does that lead to? It leads to contentment, not to lack of contentment. And that's the word santuti. And my abbot in Kusala Hermitage, he is called santuti. So if you have few wishes, if you are contented and easily satisfied, that's when you are practicing in the right way here. And then the next one is seclusion, viveka. And viveka is usually practiced in two ways. So it talks about seclusion, not crowding. So probably we can relate to this quite well now, because India is quite a crowded place, isn't it? So when you come out, there is a lot of people and a lot of cars and a lot of activity, and that basically kind of often interferes with a peaceful mind, with a calm mind. So we try to get away from this crowdedness. So we remove ourselves, we remove our body, and we go to a physical location that is kind of quiet. Because even in the hotel, I was just reflecting, you have the corridor outside, it's so much noise outside because they don't really give much attention to insulating the doors. But then they kind of play music to blurt out the sound outside. But I don't know if that is actually, you're trying to crowd out the crowds with more crowding. So it doesn't really work, does it? But then, of course, there is also chitta viveka, and that is the seclusion of the mind. And that is something we have to learn and to develop, that we can kind of create a bubble around ourselves and retrieve back into that bubble on the inside, and let the sound outside, let the activity outside, which is crowding all over the place, be left outside and not be able to kind of reach inside. And that's when we are able to withdraw. And then that will lead to energy, not laziness. Virya. And virya is one of those factors that appears in so many causal factors that are positive, the 5 balas, the 5 spiritual powers, the 5 spiritual, they become powers, but before that they're like potential. And then of course it's also in the 7 enlightenment factors. But we have to understand that this energy is an energy that flows because we are inspired, because we have put all the other things in place beforehand. It's like an effortless energy. It's something which starts to flow again, like in the sequence before, because all the things that are hindering us from experiencing it have been kind of removed and done away with. So the energy which is there can flow in, the good energy, the wholesome energy, and then it can fill up and we can really kind of get charged up. And you might have experienced that during this pilgrimage, just sitting peacefully in one of those places, or maybe hearing the Dhamma explained in some way that really made sense to you, and then energy suddenly starts to flow. And you feel awake, you feel energized, you feel full of this beautiful, bubbly, but at the same time still energy that doesn't distract or crowd the mind. And then that leads to subharo. Su is usually good, and bharo means like a burden or something which is heavy. And subharo, they translate as unburdensome. So you are unburdened. You are free. You have, unburdened yourself. I don't know. I can't say it in any other way. And that is the teaching, the training, and the teacher's instruction. And then, of course, one other thing that also is helpful in that respect is to reflect on the 5 hindrances. And it's good to know them, and it's good to get a feel for them and to understand if they're present or if they're strong, if they're weak, or if they're even absent. So they're good kind of indicators for us as well to know that we are moving in the right direction. And I described that in the BSW once when I went to give a talk there, and I came early into the hall and I was trying to figure out, where the aircon is and where the different lights are, and I didn't know which switch what does what, and then there were some dim switches as well. So that was kind of the simile for me. You try something out, you turn the knob, and by turning the knob you realize what is increasing, what is decreasing. You switch it on and you switch it off, and you just listen. You feel, where is it heading, what's happening. And then you will be able to gradually figure out if those defilements, if those hindrances are increasing or if they are decreasing. But again, sometimes it's a bit less than a switch. It's more of a dim switch, and you can't turn it too quickly. So you have to have a bit of presence and a bit of understanding what's going on. But again, the 5 hindrances, just as a quick summary here, I assume most of you are very familiar with them. So the first 2 are the strongest ones. They are strong wanting, strong desire, but it's a specific desire. It's the desire for the 5 sense pleasures through the 5 senses, but also thinking, pondering, worrying about these things in your mind. Kamachanda. And then the opposite of that is when we don't want things, when we push away things, when we hate things, when we want to eradicate things, this kind of aversive energy. And they are like the 2 adults. And from those 2 energies, you get the children, which are kind of children are smaller than their parents usually, especially in the beginning when they're born, and children as well. So it's important that we pay most attention to the 2 big ones. And when they are subdued, when they are dealt in a way with that they start to fade away and to actually disappear, then we won't have the other ones. The next two are too much energy or too little energy. So if you have too much energy, but it's a kind of bad, distracting energy, then you are restless. You're just running around. Your mind is racing, 300 miles an hour, and you can't actually see what's going on. You're jumping from one thought to the next thought to the next thought to the next thought. And that way you won't be able to gather any understanding and have any wisdom, because you never have enough time to ponder, to hold whatever you're investigating for long enough. So it's a restlessness. And the restlessness also comes because you are discontented. That's what we talked about before, discontent, not wanting something. And that feeds this idea of being restless. And then the opposite of that, if you have wasted too much energy through, thinking or strong desires, then you have sloth and torpor, they call it. So you are dull, you are tired, you are everything is hazy, or you even sometimes don't like things, and that's why you go away into a state of oblivion, basically, which feels a little bit nicer than having to deal with the stuff out there, but it is a hindrance because it again clouds clarity. And then the last one is doubt. Doubt about the teacher, doubt about the practice, doubt about yourself. Well, basically doubt about everything. And it's good to ask questions. Yes, but you always have to realize that questions, they go round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And one question always leads to another question and to another question and to another question. It's like Ajahn Brahm says, it's like the satellite which is going around the earth, taking pictures all the time, asking questions and gathering some information, yes. But it misses the point because it is not actually coming down to this planet and experiencing it firsthand and actually gathering an experiential understanding. In Pali, it's called to pusati, to touch, to get in contact with the reality. And that can only happen if you are actually there with that thing and not just flying past. Okay, and one other thing that just popped into my mind as I was reading out those suttas with, the desires. One of the things we have to realize with desires is that they are endless. They promise that once you have taken whatever you needed to take, this idea of the desire and longing in you, which says, okay, if only you get this one thing or this one answer to this one question, it will answer everything and you will be fine and you will be at peace. But that's the simile of the person who is in a boat out in the ocean and the person is thirsty and they want to drink something. And water is all around them, but there is one big problem. It's salt water. So as you drink that salt water, it will only make you more thirsty. And it won't actually, solve the problem. It won't answer the question of the thirst that you have. So you have to wait for the rain. You have to wait for the pure water. You have to, put a tarp out, leave it out overnight so that the condensation of the pure water can accumulate there, and then you drink that. Because the other water, even though it seems so obvious that it must be the solution, it is actually poisoning you in the process of drinking it. The more you drink, the more thirsty you become, and eventually it basically poisons your whole system and you die because of it. Okay, so that's a few reflections from my side. I hope there is something in there that makes sense. Hopefully it hasn't brought up more questions.